Hello. I have never gone live on YouTube before, so I apologize if some things are not perfect, but we're going to go with it anyways. And we're just going to get right into it. I have a full presentation to share with you that I'm really excited about. I have shared this with my husband, even though he doesn't have a menstrual cycle, but I shared it with him. And I shared it with a family member just to get some feedback before I shared it publicly. And I think it went pretty well. The feedback I got was really helpful and positive. So I'm ready to go. And this will be saved on my channel so you can go back and rewatch it whenever you want. Um, and I'm really happy to share with you, and thank you for being here. So let's get into it. Menstrual Cycle 101. Before we get into the phases, because I'm going to be sharing with you the phases of the cycle and what those mean, the recommendations for each phase, all of that, I want to just point out a few very, very important things. Number one is a healthy cycle is one that you can comfortably live with. This does not mean that it is completely pain free or completely no symptoms. It just means that you can live with them and they are not like debilitating. So for some people, a healthy cycle does look like no cramps, no backaches, no nothing. But for others, it looks like mild cramps or like just very light cramps. It shouldn't be cramps that like make you feel like you need to throw up or anything like that, right? So it's one that you can live with comfortably. Also, everyone's cycles are so different. So getting to know yours and your body is going to be the most helpful. Obviously, these tips that I'm going to share with you are going to help, but you need to understand your body before you can really get anywhere. And I'll be sharing the app that I use to track my cycle. That's very helpful, and I totally recommend it to anyone. Number three, healthy hormones are what leads to a healthy cycle. So if you don't have a healthy cycle right now, if your periods are really heavy or really painful or whatever it might be, that means your hormones are not as healthy as they could be. And a healthy cycle starts with healthy habits. Healthy hormones are because of healthy habits. So you have to have healthy habits in order to have healthy hormones for a long-term period. You can have healthy hormones if you have unhealthy habits for a short amount of time, but that's not going to last forever unless you're really lucky or something. But healthy hormones start with healthy habits. And the big ones, obviously, we probably all know are like stress management, getting enough sleep, eating healthy, and exercising well. But there's also a lot of small things that can affect your hormones, and we will get into some of those. And really, your hormones are affected by everything, which means it's going to take time to stabilize them. It's going to take time to see the benefits. It's not going to be an immediate thing. Pretty much nothing in health is an immediate thing, right? Like you don't go to the gym one day and expect to see abs the next day. At least you shouldn't. But um, just it's the same with hormones. Like you're not going to change what you're eating one day and completely expect your next period to be like perfect. So just keep that in mind. This is the most average cycle. Again, not everyone's cycle is 28 days, not everyone's period is 5 days. So this is going to look a little bit different based on your specific body. But this is the easiest way to like explain the cycle is a 4-week cycle. So obviously the red is menstruation. That is your period. The blue is the follicular phase, green is ovulation phase, and pink is luteal phase. And I'm going to explain each of them a little bit more deeply in a second. So menstruation, your period. It's also known as your inner winter. Each of these 4 phases has a corresponding season that can help you remember like how you might be feeling or what foods to eat and exercises to do, things like that. So your menstruation period can last anywhere between 3 and 7 days normally. If it's longer than that, that could be a sign that something's wrong. But again, use your own discretion, talk to your doctor. 3 to 7 days is pretty normal. Day one of your period is also day one of your entire cycle. So between the first day of your period and the day that you ovulate, that can technically be considered your follicular phase. And then from the day you ovulate to the day of your next period is considered the luteal phase. So there's like two big phases. One, the first half is the follicular, the second half is the luteal, and then you combine them and it's the whole cycle. But to make things a little bit easier, there's two extra phases, two shorter phases. So there's menstruation within the follicular because your period is a little bit unique and different than the rest of your follicular phase. And then ovulation, which is kind of in the middle and in between both the follicular and luteal phases. So just keep that in mind. The follicular phase is what's noted as the inner spring, and it's the first half of your cycle, like I mentioned. That is when your body is preparing for potential pregnancy because it ends with ovulation. So that's really what your body is doing, and we'll get into more of what you might be feeling and what like the more specifics of what's going on in a few slides. Ovulation is also known as your inner summer. You only ovulate one day out of your entire ovulation phase. But there is a phase because that's like the highest risk of getting pregnant, those few days before you ovulate, the day you ovulate, and then a few days after you ovulate. So that's why it's a phase instead of just a single day. And also, you probably aren't going to ovulate on the same day every month, which is also why there's a phase, because that can change depending on a lot of different factors. So just keep that in mind. This is when you are at the highest risk of getting pregnant. Luteal phase, the last phase, also, I think I might be blocking the text, but it is your inner fall, which is, again, the second half of your cycle. Your body temperature is going to rise, and your body is preparing to support either a pregnancy or it's preparing to start your period. So one or the other, there's no in between, right? What is happening with your hormones throughout your cycle is very interesting. So at the start of your period, you can see that everything is pretty low. That's why you're feeling low energy. And then as your period starts to end, your estrogen and your LH hormones are increasing pretty quickly. And they are going to peak. FSH, LH, and estrogen are all going to peak right before or right around ovulation. And then they drop pretty rapidly. And the only two that peak at all are in the luteal phase are estrogen and progesterone, but estrogen still isn't as high as its like big peak. It just has like a little second wind. And then progesterone peaks in the luteal phase because you need progesterone to be able to get pregnant and stay pregnant. So if you got pregnant around ovulation, your progesterone is going to peak in order to support that pregnancy. Even if you're not pregnant around ovulation or you didn't get pregnant, your progesterone is still going to rise because that's what it's supposed to do. So it's just doing that in case you did get pregnant because your body wants to support that pregnancy. Alrighty, the menstrual phase, what is happening to your body exactly? We all know that we're bleeding. The uterine lining is being shed. That is what is actually coming out of you, okay? The female sex hormones, like I mentioned, are pretty much bottomed out at this point. And the hormonal changes that you're experiencing are what leads to bloating and digestion changes that are very common. Your body is retaining more water and salt. So that's why you see body changes throughout your cycle, throughout the month. It's normal to be a little bit more bloated during your period. It's not normal if it's painful or if it's like really uncomfortable or if it's very excessive, but a bit is totally fine, healthy. Cramps we love those. They're caused by uterine contractions. So those are obviously really fun to have. But that's just your uterus contracting to get the stuff out of it. Your body is disposing of an egg and getting ready for the next cycle. And I like to just say that it's big let that shit go energy because that's really what it's doing. It's literally just getting rid of everything to start completely anew the next month. How you might be feeling, this might be my favorite slide just because of the pictures, but how you might be feeling on your period, I'm sure we all know. Tired, irritable, mood swings. You might be feeling really angry for no reason, or you might have a reason and you just feel angry. Insecurities are very common during this time because we just feel like we look different. We are feeling different in our body, which can lead to us feeling like we look different, even if we don't. Um, you might be feeling gassy and bloated. Again, those hormonal changes are causing you to retain more salt and water. You might just feel ugly, kind of like that insecurity thing. You just feel like you look different and you look worse than you did before. And overall, you're just not feeling like yourself. I think we can all relate to that. It's just you don't feel at all like your normal self. Recommended workouts for when you are on your period are primarily low impact. So things like yoga or walks or just resting. You will probably feel like you can't move as fast or lift as heavy or just do the same amount of work with the same amount of effort during this time because your body is just tired. Um, Now, this can you can start to feel like you can handle more during the end of your period, but especially at the beginning is when you're gonna feel like that. My unpopular opinion is that you can do your normal workouts. You can lift on your period. You can go for a run when you're on your period. You can do those things that you normally do, but you may have to scale it back a little bit. You may have to anticipate that you're not going to feel as good. So you're not going to be able to go quite as far or quite as fast. You're not going to be able to lift quite as heavy, but you can still do those things. I see a lot of things online about like on your period, you shouldn't do those things. You should just rest or do yoga or walk, and that's great. But I don't agree with that. I think you can do your normal workouts on your period. You just have to pay attention to how your body is feeling and scale back accordingly. Recommended foods for when you're on your period are primarily like warm, high protein foods. The warm foods come from Eastern medicine because they believe a lot of cultures believe that when you are sick or recovering, which is like your period is seen as a recovery period, you want to be keeping your body warm and eating warm foods, taking hot showers, hot baths, using those like heating pads. We all know that those really help with cramps. So we want to be eating primarily warm foods. Staying hydrated is super, super important. It can make your bleeding a little bit lighter. That's more if you are staying hydrated throughout your entire cycle, but it's still important to stay hydrated on your period. Having magnesium, iron, and omega-3 rich foods such as spinach, dark chocolate, fish, there's a ton more. Those are going to be really good on your period, especially the magnesium and iron. Iron because it's in your blood and you are losing blood on your period. Magnesium is really helpful because it can help with cramps and other PMS symptoms. It's going to be really helpful if you're having magnesium throughout your whole cycle. That'll make your period easier. But if you have it on your period, that's still a plus. The things you should avoid are the things that you probably are craving when you're on your period. So, salt, sugar, alcohol, and caffeine. Salt will just make you more bloated and uncomfortable because, again, your body is retaining that salt. Sugar is just more inflammatory. And so, again, it's not going to make you feel as good if you are already experiencing things like cramps and like back pain and things like that. Alcohol, again, same thing. It's inflammatory. It's not really good for you no matter what phase of the cycle you're in, but especially on your period when your body is trying to take care of itself. And caffeine, this is really interesting. I learned this while I was creating this presentation, but caffeine actually, since it restricts the blood flow, slows down it restricts blood vessels, constricts, I don't know the word. It slows down blood flow, which can make cramps worse. So you might not want to have caffeine when you're having period cramps. Um, I totally understand that you're probably feeling tired and caffeine would really help you, but just keep that in mind. Maybe try it out on your next period and see if it makes a difference or not. Okay, final recommendations besides food and fitness recommendations for your period. Prioritize sleep and rest. Don't feel guilty about it. You need it. You actually, research has shown that you need more sleep on your period. So it's okay. Or around your period, even. You don't even have to be actively bleeding. Um, Embrace wanting to be a homebody. In a couple weeks after your period, you're going to want to be really social and hang out with people and talk with people all the time. Right now is not one of those times, most likely. So embrace that and stay at home. Use your heating pad, your heating blanket, take a hot bath or hot shower. One of my favorite things to do on my period is journal about what I want to let go of as I go into my next cycle because, like I said, your body is really in this like let that shit go energy. And so if you can get your mind on that same wavelength, it's really cool. And it's just like a fun way to kind of celebrate your period and change your mindset around like, oh, instead of dreading your period or instead of complaining that you're on your period, which I totally understand. Like, it's not fun to be on your period necessarily. But if you can do things that make it a little bit more fun, like journaling about what you want to let go of and what you want to bring in this next cycle, like the goals that you want to reach and things like that, it can be a little bit more exciting. It can feel like a refresh, a restart, like the new year. We all love a good New Year's, right? Like that's what it can feel like every single month in your period. Another thing that's really helpful is using non-toxic period products. So my favorites are cups and period underwear, but organic pads and tampons are also really, really good options. Um, Organic pads and tampons can help your period last a shorter amount of time and potentially be lighter bleeding times or help with lighter bleeding. So that's really nice. In my experience, since using period cups last year, my periods have been so much easier. And I will get into a little bit of like my story towards the end of this, but it really, they have made my periods so much easier. And I can notice like less cramping versus when I use a tampon. So just thought I'd bring that up. The follicular phase, your inner spring. So, what's actually happening to your body during the follicular phase is estrogen and LH hormones are rising, like we saw in that graph. Your energy is coming back and you're starting to feel like yourself again. Your body shape and size is going to go back to normal after all of that bloating and water weight gain on your period. And what's happening in your body is it's just maturing an egg to prepare for ovulation and fertilization. Very medical terminology. How you're probably going to feel. Um, it's the best way I can explain it is like you're coming back to life. It's like the fog has lifted and you feel so like on top of the world. At least that's how it is for me. You are probably going to feel energized, motivated, and way more social than you were on your period. It's also very common to feel more creative and like you want to start something new because you let all of that shit go and now you're ready to start like a new project or get back into the swing of things, all of that sort of fun new year type things. These feelings can come on like all at once, but they can also be very gradual. It just depends on your body. The recommended workouts for the follicular phase. Again, you can do any type of workout you want during any time of your cycle, but these are what people recommend because your body is more able to reap the benefits of these at this time. Lifting, higher intensity cardio like HIIT workouts or fast long runs, things like that. Essentially, anything that's going to challenge you because your body is going to be prepared to do harder and longer workouts, and you're going to actually feel like you can do them without like draining your energy and your effort levels. Recommended foods. Anything with magnesium, again, your magnesium levels tend to be lower during this phase of your cycle. So if you can eat foods that boost them up, that's really helpful, or take supplements. Um, and also eating foods that reduce the effects of estrogen can be really helpful because again, your estrogen is increasing like we saw in that graph. And if you want to um, not have high estrogen, if you already have high estrogen, then eating foods that reduce the effects of estrogen can help with estrogen dominance, which I believe is pretty common and can lead to things like heavy bleeding, really painful periods, all of those fun things. So, eating things like chicken, eggs, berries, broccoli, fermented foods, and seeds. Again, these are all like very common foods to eat in the spring. Springtime is when you start eating more fruits and vegetables, you start having seeds, all of all of those types of things because this is your inner spring. So those are the foods you want to be eating. And again, I just want to make it really clear that you can eat whatever you want, whenever you want. These are just recommendations for like if you want to get the most out of the food, try eating them at this time of your cycle. But this isn't to say that you can't have chicken on your period. Like you totally can. So just to be clear. The ovulation phase. What is happening to my body during ovulation? There's a lot going on. Estrogen, FSH, and LH are all going to peak during around that time, like we saw in that graph. You can only get pregnant when you ovulate. You cannot get pregnant when you don't ovulate. I know in school they probably told you like you can get pregnant at any time. They were trying to scare you. It's not that easy. Like there's only a few days every cycle where you can actually get pregnant, unless something like really crazy or abnormal happens. But for the most part, for most people, you can only get pregnant at a certain time of your cycle. Okay, now that that is out of the way, what's actually happening in medical terms is your body is releasing an egg from one of your ovaries or from both of your ovaries if you have the ability to do that, which normally runs in families that have twins running in their family. So you can technically release one egg from each ovary. That's how you end up with twins, one type of twin. But most people are only releasing one egg at a time. So you can get like ovulation cramps, and it feels like a period cramp, but it's only on one side. So instead of like across the lower belly, it's just on like one side, like kind of right next to your hip. And it can actually be kind of painful, but they don't last as long as period cramps. They don't last as long as 2 days or whatever, however long your period cramps last. Mine usually last a couple of days. It only really lasts for like maybe an hour tops. Sometimes they're really short, but they can be kind of intense. So not everyone can feel ovulation cramps, but if you can, you probably know what I'm talking about. Your pheromones are popping off during this time. It's really interesting. I learned this from This Is Your Brain on Birth Control, which is a book I really highly recommend. That book, it's so good. But I read it a few years ago, and one of the things that stuck with me is that when you're ovulating, you like your body is making you more attractive to people that you would biologically have a healthy baby with, and vice versa. So people that you would have a healthy baby with are more attractive to you. Like you are more attracted to them and they are more attracted to you. That's just like a fun fact. It's really interesting, but that happens during your ovulation phase because all that your body wants during this phase is for you to get pregnant. That's literally like biologically, that's what's happening. How you might be feeling. Hot. This is when your confidence like hits its peak usually during your cycle. You might be feeling flirty. You probably are feeling very social, very sexual because again, your body like you are more attractive and you are more attracted to other people. So you just are feeling very like sexual, flirty, that kind of thing. Again, super confident. You're probably going to have a lot of energy, a lot of motivation. You just want to get things done. This is the time of my cycle where I can look back and see like Oh, I had so much energy that day because and I know that I was in my ovulation phase because I woke up at 5, I went to work, I did blah, 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 blah. I went like back to back to back to back to back. I didn't feel like I needed a nap. And then I went to bed at like 9 o'clock and did it all over again the next day. And I was like so pumped. I wasn't tired. That's how you know you're in your ovulation phase. If you're just like, let's get this shit done, let's go to work. That's what it's like. It's the best. Recommended workouts. Obviously, the first I had to put sex because you are probably going to feel very sexual and like you want to have sex because that's what your body wants you to do because it wants you to make a baby. Even if you don't want to make a baby, then it still wants you to have sex. So just to be careful, use protection if you're not trying to have a baby. Lifting heavy is also a good workout because again, you're going to have that energy, motivation. You're just going to feel like on top of the world, like you can do anything. High intensity cardio again, and those long runs or bike rides, walks, swimming, or a spin class would be really good. Again, you can do all of these at any other time of your cycle, but these are just like what you might be feeling more up to doing. And while you're feeling like that, you might as well reap the benefits of it, right? Recommended foods for the ovulation phase. Omega 3s. Omega 3s are really going to be good at any time of your cycle because they're just so good for you. Folic acids, because you need folic acid to support a healthy pregnancy. So that's going to be really good. Even if you're not trying to get pregnant, like they're a good thing to have. You need them either way. You just need more of them if you are trying to get pregnant or if you are pregnant. And you can see the list of foods that have these nutrients in there. I don't want to read them all off because you can see them. But another really good idea to include in your diet is complex carbs to help keep your energy up. So your energy during this phase is already going to be at a higher baseline, but because you're going to want to do so many things because you have so much energy and so much motivation, you want to be eating complex carbs to make sure your energy doesn't like flatline because you're overworking yourself. So as long as you are eating well and you have a pretty healthy cycle, like you're gonna have a lot of energy during this phase and it's gonna feel really good. Foods high in fiber are also gonna help with estrogen dominance. And I should have made a slide on estrogen dominance, but really, like I mentioned earlier, it's just that you have too high of estrogen, and that can lead to things like cysts, PCOS, endometriosis, I believe, painful periods, heavy bleeding, all of those sorts of things. So, and I actually had that, which I will get into in a little bit. But if you eat foods high in fiber, it can help with that. Berries are always a good choice. Berries are also high in fiber. Um, Whole grains, really like any fruits and vegetables are going to be high in fiber. So I didn't put a list of foods, but pretty much everything on this list, most of the things on this list are also high in fiber. So just look at this list if you want. Um, and then this is just a little fun fact I also learned while I was making this, but tomatoes contain lycopene, I think it's pronounced like that, which can improve sperm count and movement. And cooking tomatoes increases the lycopene. So if you are trying to get pregnant, feed your man's tomatoes, cooked tomatoes. Okay, last but certainly not least, the luteal phase. What's happening to your body? Well, let me tell you, estrogen, FSH, and LH hormones, they're all going to drop and you're going to feel it. Progesterone is going to rise in preparation for a pregnancy because you need enough progesterone to get and stay pregnant. So even if you're not pregnant, like you didn't even have sex, it still should be rising. Um, and your body is really just preparing for a pregnancy or your period, one or the other, right? There's no in between. Um, and this is such a long phase. Like your luteal phase is probably going to last like 2 weeks. So it's half of your cycle. And so the way that you are going to feel at the first half of your luteal phase versus the second half is going to be very, very different. So just keep that in mind. Like the way that you're going to feel during this phase is not going to be consistent throughout the whole phase, which makes it very unique. How you might be feeling low energy and motivation as this phase goes on. Again, you're probably going to feel lower energy and just, I don't want to say worse, but you're just going to feel like lower, more tired, more PMSy as it gets closer to your period. So you're probably not going to feel this way right after you ovulate. It's going to be closer as close as you get to your period. The closer you get, the more you're going to feel these things. So you're going to want to wrap projects up and spend more time alone. Again, your period is like the inner winter. You want to be a homebody. You're basically hibernating. So the closer it gets to your period, the more you're going to want to spend time alone. And you may start feeling PMS symptoms as it gets closer to your period, obviously. Um, I I would hope that you're not feeling PMS symptoms for like 2 weeks before your period. If you are, that could be a sign that something's going on. Um, I used to feel PMS symptoms like a week and a half to 2 weeks before my period, and now I feel it maybe a couple days before. And that's because of these healthy habits that I have started doing over the last year, and I'm going to share a lot of those in a few slides. So just keep that in mind. The recommended workouts during this luteal phase, again, I don't need to say this again, but like you can do whatever workouts you want. Lifting, light to moderate cardio, so you're probably not going to want to do like super intense stuff right before your period. You can if you want to, but you're probably not going to feel up to it, which is totally fine. Yoga and Pilates are also really good options. Again, I'm going to beat this into the ground. You can still do your normal workouts, but you just might have to lower the intensity or scale back in other ways. You might need a little bit more rest time in between sets. You might need, let's say, like lighter weights. You might need to go a slower pace when you're running. It just depends on how you're feeling. Okay. Just keep that in mind. Get to know your body, get to know your limits. That's like the biggest piece of good health advice I can give you at all. Recommended foods. Protein, protein, protein. During this phase, especially the later luteal phase, which is as it gets closer to your period, you are going to feel hungrier. And that is completely normal. You don't need to feel bad about that. You might realize, like, oh my gosh, I ate so much today. That's totally fine. You are very likely going to feel hungrier and need more food during the late luteal phase. And on the opposite end, like during your ovulation phase, you might not even want that much food, or you might want lighter foods. Like it's totally normal and healthy to feel that way. And don't make yourself feel bad about wanting more food just because there is a reason. So protein is going to help keep you full. It's going to help with hunger, and it's also really good for you. So meat, poultry, fish, beans, all of those good things. Complex carbs. So in your ovulation phase, you wanted to eat complex carbs to make sure that your energy stays high. But during your luteal phase, your energy baseline is going to be a little bit lower. So you want to have complex carbs so that they can give you a boost of energy and make sure that you are staying full. Because if you're eating really simple carbs, which I guess I should explain this, simple carbs are things like, oh, like basically anything with added sugar, like candy or soda, things like that, that you eat it and you feel the sugar rush hit really hard and really fast. Those are simple sugars, simple carbs. Complex carbs, on the other hand, are things like whole grains or sweet potatoes, things that take longer to digest, so your blood sugar doesn't like spike right after eating them. And they help keep you full, whereas simple carbs make you hungrier. So just keep that in mind. Foods high in fiber, again, will help with estrogen dominance at this time, and fiber also helps with hunger because it basically fiber, protein, and carbs just take longer to digest. Complex carbs, might I add. They just take longer to digest, and so it's not like you're eating a candy bar and then you're still hungry right after. It's like you're eating a full balanced meal and you're not going to be hungry for a few hours. So those are really, really helpful tips, especially during this phase where your hunger levels are probably going to increase pretty decently. Again, staying hydrated. This is really, really important throughout the whole cycle, but especially the luteal phase because you're leading up to your period. Staying hydrated, I have found, helps my PMS and periods become so much easier. It's crazy. I will sometimes have a heavy like first day of my period and I'm like, oh yeah, I was dehydrated. And then I'll make sure that I'm like prioritizing water intake and it gets easier as the period goes on. And then the next one, if I'm still prioritizing that water intake, will be easier than the last one. So just keep that in mind. Very important stuff. Okay, healthy habits for a healthy cycle. Last year at this time, well, last May, so 13 months ago, I had my first period after getting my IUD out. I had an IUD for almost 2 years, got it taken out, and I didn't have a period for 3 months. And then it started right around the 3 month mark. And when I tell you it was the worst period of my life, it was the worst period of my life. It was so insanely heavy. I had so much blood coming out that I was actually concerned. And I was like texting my mom, like, is this normal? What is going on? I can't do this again. I was like, did I make a mistake getting my IUD out? That's how bad it was. Because when I had my IUD, I didn't have a period. So I started like researching because I was like, I actually cannot do this again. Like, I don't know how I'm going to be able to go to work. I don't know how I'm going to be able to like work out. I was living in Florida, so I was like, I can't go to the beach if this is what my period is like. I can't go to the beach on my period because it was that bad. Like, I bled through cups, I bled through pads, I bled through like period underwear. It was crazy. And I was doubling up on things and I was still bleeding through them all. So it was really, really bad. And I felt so alone. And I just needed help. Um, so I looked at like Instagram accounts. I looked at podcast episodes. I looked at random articles on Google and I just tried to figure out what was going on. And what I figured out was that I probably had high estrogen. And then a month later, I got my blood work done, and I was right. I had high estrogen, pretty dang high. So first of all, I was proud of myself for figuring it out without getting blood work done, but I was also very relieved that there was like a reason why that was happening. Um, so immediately after that period, I was like, okay, here's what we're gonna do. I compiled like all of the things that I learned that I felt applied to me from Google and podcasts and Instagram accounts and a book that I was reading, which I can't remember the book, but it was really good and I need to get it because I didn't finish it. It has so much information. I think it's Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom. I think that's what it's called. It was so good. But I need to buy it so that I can read the whole thing because I only read part of it. So that was like my Bible, to be honest. um, so here's what I did, and here's what I would recommend, especially if you think you have high estrogen or if you have been told you have high estrogen. Again, before doing anything like drastic, make sure you talk to your doctor or whoever is doing your lab work and taking care of you primarily. So just make sure you talk to them. But I limited dairy for about a month or two because I was eating Greek yogurt like every day for breakfast and I would eat cheese all the time. And so I was eating quite a bit of dairy. And I read that like that might not be so good for your cycle. So I decided to just test it out, try it out. A lot of this is going to be trial and error. And what worked for one person might not work for you. What works for you might not work for me. So it's okay. It's just trial and error. I limited it for 1 to 2 months. I can't remember quite how long, but basically I had no dairy except for like 3 times in 1 to 2 months. And that was really all I needed. It was like a little reset because now I can have Greek yogurt like for breakfast all the time, and my periods are totally healthy and fine and easy to deal with. So if you have to limit dairy, just know that it might not be for your whole life. It might be, but it might not be because it wasn't for me. I also started exercising like more intensely. Again, I was living in Florida at the time, so I just could go on like an easy run in the hot afternoon Florida sun, and it felt really difficult because I was sweating so much, but sweat helps to get rid of excess estrogen, so that's why I did that. But obviously, you can find other ways to sweat. You don't have to run. You can go lift weights. You can go in a sauna. Saunas are really good. I should have put that on here, but I didn't. But just finding some way to sweat. And also, exercise has a million other benefits. So, why wouldn't you want to do that? Third, don't put lavender oil directly on your skin if you have high estrogen. There has been research showing that it can increase your estrogen um, quite a lot. And I worked at a clinic last year where the nurse practitioner who was running the clinic had kind of like tested this on herself, and her estrogen was like through the roof after just like I think it was a month of putting stuff that had like lavender oil in it, like lavender scented lotion or whatever on her skin. So, of course, that's anecdotal and just use your own judgment, but there have been some research studies that show that it does do this. Of course, there is research that shows that it doesn't, but you know, just like assess the risks and rewards. Do you really love lavender oil or lavender scented things enough to potentially make your period worse? I don't know. You can also always just test it out and see if your period gets easier after a couple months. Going kind of along with that, I try to use non or low toxic products. So this website, ewg.org/skin deep, you can search like almost any product. They don't have every single product on there because there's a lot of products to go through, but they have most of them, especially like the really common ones. And they basically test those products to see how like toxic they are, and they give them a grade. So it's really, really helpful. And it also will explain to you, like, if they do have toxins or like questionable ingredients, it'll tell you like what those things could lead to. Like, if they are maybe not good for like your respiratory system, or if they're possibly like cancer causing chemicals, things like that. So it's really, really helpful for a lot of different health reasons, but a lot of the chemicals in these products can really, really, really mess up your hormones. And not just women's hormones, men's hormones too. Like they can mess up testosterone and all kinds of things like that. So you try to stay away from a lot of like the common beauty products. And I would go for like the low or non toxic ones, and they are going to be a little bit more expensive most of the time. But there are a lot of companies out there now making way more affordable options, and it's really, really nice because it's become such like a huge deal and people want to buy these products. So um, whenever you're like you run out of deodorant next time, or you run out of shampoo or conditioner, I would just like look on this website and see what options are the healthiest, or you can even just look at the product that you're currently using and see if it's actually healthy or if it's like way worse than you would have thought. So that's just something to consider. Going to sleep and waking up at the same time every day is also going to be really helpful for your hormones. It just helps to regulate them. And along with this, morning sunlight is really, really good for your hormones. Don't wear sunscreen or sunglasses if you can. Try to get some sunlight just on your face, in your eyes, ideally before you look at a screen, but like as soon as you can, first thing in the morning. If you wake up before the sun rises, then just go out when the sun comes up. But if you wake up after the sun is up or when the sun is rising, then I encourage you to go outside, even if it's just for like 5 minutes, and just get some sunlight because it helps regulate your hormones. And it's also really good for you. And it's nice to wake up and not have to like rush to get ready. You can just take some time to chill and relax and enjoy the sun. Um, and going along with healthy habits, obviously, we all know that diet plays a huge, huge role in everything. So just making sure that like 80% of what you're eating is quality, high quality foods like fruits and veggies, protein, healthy fats, things like that. Staying away from things like canola oil and opting for olive oil instead. If you can purchase like grass-fed ground beef versus regular ground beef, but just making sure that most of what you're getting is not snacks with like a ton of added sugar or candy or soda. Just making sure that we all know what healthy foods are. I don't need to explain that to you. So just making sure that we know, like, am I eating enough whole foods? Like, am I eating enough healthy foods to support my body because it really needs it. Last but not least, certainly not least, cycle tracking. I use the Clue app. I know there's a million apps out there, but I've been using the Clue app for over a year now, and it's really, really helpful. There's so many things that you can track. If you're trying to get pregnant, I believe you have to pay for it if you're trying to like track that sort of thing. But if you're just trying to track your period, it's like almost completely free and it has so much information. And what I have done, I'll show you, is I added it as a widget to my home screen. So it's right there, right here. Um, and it'll tell you like about how many days until your next period and what day that you are currently on. So if you haven't been tracking, I would suggest, if you know when your last period started, I would suggest downloading the app and putting in your last period. But if you don't know, then I would just suggest starting at the start of your next period. Um, and I would recommend tracking as much as you can, at least at the very beginning, because you can track your symptoms, you can track your energy levels, you can track your like sex drive and all those sorts of things, your discharge, what that looks like, and get a really good idea of like what is going on during each phase of your cycle. But then the more you get used to it, the more you'll know like what to expect, what's normal, what's not normal for you. And it's just really good to get all of that data and be curious about your cycle. I feel like we weren't taught about our cycle and we didn't know that like we should be curious. All we knew is that we should just dread having our period. But being curious and switching that mindset from like being dreadful and so negative about our periods to being more neutral and just like, oh, what can this teach me this month? Like what data can I gather on this topic on during this phase of my cycle? It can be really helpful and it can make it not such an icky thing and just more of like a, I don't know, like a fun research project that you're doing on yourself. I totally understand that it can be very hard to live with periods if they make your life super, super hard. Like having that one really heavy period, I was like, oh my gosh, this is insane. Like I don't know how I would go to work if I had started my period on a day that I had work. Luckily I didn't, but like it would have been bad if I had. So I totally understand, but that your mindset around your period is going to be hard to shift. But if you can switch it to a more neutral, like, oh, let's get curious about this, it really does help. And that is all I have. Thank you so much for being here. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I am so glad that I got to do this, and I'm looking forward to hopefully doing this more often. Thank you again. Love you.